Greetings everyone, welcome to our YouTube channel. Our channel is dedicated to showing everybody that the insane fiance visa process that's in existence now was given to us by an insane, arrogant, incompetent, and corrupt US federal government. So please join the fight, subscribe below, and we need subscribers. We're new on YouTube, but we've been doing this for several months now, and we're a couple hundred people strong. So when you see new topic on a slide, that's just an indication that we're going to be talking about something different. This is a video, a C-SPAN video, and it was made during a U.S. Senate Committee on Immigration meeting that they held, and the name of the meeting is the Fiance Visa Fraud. These are the main players, the main senators that opened the meeting. In the lower right, we have the leadership team from the Department of Homeland Security / USCIS and the Department of State / US Consulates. So the members of this leadership team are Donald Neufeld, David Donahue, David Renaud, Matthew Emmerich, and Greg Navarro. In the Senate, the senators that are involved are the chair is Chuck Grassley, Senator Feinstein, ranking member. She's been in the Senate since George Washington, I think. Dick Durbin, he's also getting up there. He's a senator from Illinois. And then we have two senators that came in late. Tom Tillis and Ted Cruz came in at the 1 hour and 30-minute mark. So that's, and what they're expecting from this leadership team is basically a progress report, because we had some events that took place that were pretty alarming, and that's why this leadership team was summoned in here, actually the meeting before this, to explain a few things and to get started on new policies and procedures. And here's the follow-up meeting where they're saying, okay, what happened? What's happened since our last meeting? But what they saw, and they didn't realize this because they're senators, what they saw was a smoke and mirrors show. We saw this video. I've seen the video 10 times from beginning to end, and another 10 times, sections at a time, as I needed quotes and stuff and information. So we have no idea really how the Senate committee missed this. This is obviously just a farce. This whole meeting was just a farce. We don't know whether it's, the senators called a meeting and they actually know that there's a bunch of incompetent people in the Department of Homeland Security and Department of State, and that's the best they can do, or maybe they're too busy, maybe they don't really care too much about immigration. We have no idea. But what we know is that we still have a major threat to national security because this meeting didn't change anything. So some of these people that the entire leadership team gets up there and gives a little spiel about their own organization. And Neufeld, this is just an example. He's the one of the directors of the Service Center operations. So the service centers are staffed by 3,681 employees and 1,800 contractors. So that's a pretty good ratio of contractors to employees. You have one contractor for every 2 employees, which is a little bit high even for federal government. We're federal government consultants, so we're contractors too. So we're just in shock that there's this many people, this many U.S. federal government consultants involved in this process, because this is just insane, and it's illegal, and it's incompetent, and it's just corrupt, the whole process. We'll get to that. You'll agree with us. So Senator Feinstein starts asking about this San Bernardino attack, and what's going on about it. So the San Bernardino attack was a significant event in American history, because this is the first time that a terrorist entering the United States on a fiancé visa attacked and killed Americans. This is something that we don't want to happen. Fiancé visas are, actually the easiest, fastest way to get into the country and get citizenship. So the last thing we want is terrorists coming in on fiancé visas. So she asks, what's going on? And Emmerich replies that the San Bernardino reviews have been done. Additional measures in the screening process have been identified. Gee, I wonder whatever it is, it doesn't work. And also forms were modified. Well, that'll stop terrorists, right? And the interviewers are trained on the changes. So that's just pure smoke and mirrors. There's no way in hell I would have let him off that easy. I would have grilled him for 10 minutes and, my face would have turned red and I'd be at his throat. But that was okay for her. So then Feinstein asked about 274 cases that that an ICE investigation identified as human trafficking. How did they, what's going on with human trafficking? And Emmerich replies to this, the interviewers are trained to look for human trafficking indicators. Well, hell, that'll end human trafficking, no doubt. That's another smoke and mirrors act. So in case you don't know about human trafficking, I'm backing up a step here and going to panel 1 member. The first panel to testify was panel 1. The leadership team was panel 2. So in panel 1 was this lady, Grace Huang, who was head of the Asian Pacific Institute on Gender-Based Violence. She's basically an advocate for human trafficking victims. So human trafficking, is a problem that you hear about. You might not think it's a problem in the United States, but it is. It includes, it's a global problem. Prostitution, servitude, and forced labor. People that come into the United States and they find themselves in some kind of predicament and situation that they don't want to be in, like in forced prostitution, forced servitude, forced labor in some kind of sweatshop. So that's what human trafficking is. And not only that, human trafficking, you can imagine the people that get these people into the country, they're not, like pimps and sweatshop owners. They're not sophisticated people, but they can easily get their people through the system. Why? Because a 12-year-old could do it. So here's another, Feinstein inquires about marriage fraud, and this is at the 119 mark. And gets another smoke and mirrors thing. This is Navarro, who we think is a good guy because he's an ICE guy and he cleans up after the fact. He's Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. But, he said that, fiance visas are given the most scrutiny of any visas. That was his answer to stop marriage fraud. Well, it's not going to do anything. They might get the most scrutiny, but it's going to have no effect. These are the easiest people to get into the country. They're very easiest through marriage fraud. So these are the 4 possible outcomes of any fiance visa case. You either have legit couples or they're criminals. Okay, so you have legit couples that are approved. That's a good thing. Criminals that are denied. That's a good thing. Then you have criminals who are approved. That's a bad thing. And you have legit couples who are denied. That's a bad thing. So we're going to take a brief look here at the Act, the INA, I'm sorry, the Immigration and Nationality Act, Section 104A. So in 104A, it says here in the red, it says the consular officers have the final say in the granting or refusal of any visas, or most people say the approval or denial these days. So the Secretary of State, and actually the Secretary of State delegated this to a Deputy Secretary of State who is in charge of the administration and enforcement of the provisions of this act. So in other words, the Deputy Secretary of State makes all the policies and procedures that are used and handed to the consular officer to make the decision. So here we're taking a look at the consular officers. These people are hired into the government as a GS5 or GS7, reaching a maximum level of GS9. So if you look at federal job grades down on the lower left, GS5 to 7 are entry level. The only thing below them is a 3 or 4, and those are part-time college interns that come in to work for your Senate office in the summer. So these are entry-level positions, really low level, and even a GS9 is barely up into the next level. So that's, like a senior clerical person in a corporation. So that's what your CO, that's, how this qualified the CO is that's going to decide a case. So this just shows you what's happening with international travel. It's getting more and more, there's more international travel every year, which means there's going to be more international visas because, Americans go abroad, foreigners come here, they meet each other, they, start dating, they fall in love, they want to get married. So they apply for a fiance visa. We've got to get this process right. It's just increasing every year. So these are red flags, and I just showed this because, to normal people, or at least to people that are approving for this fiance visa process, I have I-129F red flags in there because the I-129F is the form that you use to apply for a fiance visa. Red flags would be things like, differences in ethnicities, difference in language, difference in religion, difference in culture, difference in financial standing, difference in age is a big one. So, people that are applying, for a fiance visa ought to, first of all, they should go up to Google and look up I-129F. I'm sorry, up to YouTube and look up I-129F packet. And there's excellent videos on how you put a packet together to convince the government that you're real. But also look at your red flags and make a comprehensive list of all the red flags that you find, and then consider yourselves as a couple and how many red flags you have, and then study it and figure out how you're going to address your red flags when you go into an interview. So this is a new topic, and this is on the statistical analysis of fiancé visa cases. So this statistical analysis is basically doing statistics, entering all this stuff into a database. This is the I-129F form, so some clerical level person enters all this information into a database, and then all of the fields that are on here and some fields that are derived, for example, difference in age isn't on there. You have the birth date of the fiance and the fiance, and you have the birth date of the US Citizen Petitioner, so you can derive the difference in age. So this is what the government feels that they need to, analyze and then either approve or deny your case. All the fields on here can be considered indicators. So for example, a terrorist, maybe the country of birth might be an indicator. Maybe if your country of birth is Syria and now you're getting a fiance from Pakistan, that might be something that's alarming. Or, like I said, the date of birth. If there's a big difference in age, that could be an indicator. So they build this indicator system, and that's part of the process. That's part A. And this, whatever they call it, indicator system, I-129F, basically it's statistics and the manipulation of those statistics. It's a science. So the problem is with this system that, you only need to be a 12-year-old to beat the system. So naturally, a terrorist can do it. So this is our terrorist from San Bernardino. And the San Bernardino terrorists, this was a significant event in the United States because a terrorist, entered the country on a fiancé visa and killed Americans. So this guy from California, the US Citizen Petitioner, decides he's going to go all jihad, and he doesn't want to, go to Syria and fight Americans with guns. He wants to kill innocent people. So what he does is he goes up on a site, www.findajihadwife.com or www.findajihadifiance.com, and he looks around at these people, and since he's going to do a criminal act here, he's planning on one, he doesn't want to get caught, so he wants to slip through the system with no indicators. So what does he do? He looks for somebody that speaks the same language, has the same religion, and they're born 336 days apart. In other words, this person is going to slide right through the system. Why? Because they didn't meet and fall in love. He picked her out based on the lack of indicators. That's how easy it is. A 12-year-old could do it. So what happens, here's their case. Some LA newspaper got their I-129F form, and I got it from them. And then I looked it up on the case up on the site. If you're a fiancé visa couple, you're probably used to looking at this site where you put your case number in to get the status. So they flew through the system pretty fast, really fast. They flew through the USCIS, and despite the fact that she lied about a lot of things on the form, they can't tell that 'cause she's a fiancé. They don't go overseas to verify anything. So basically, a 12-year-old could beat the system. Terrorists can beat the system. So that's the statistical analysis. Then they also do a psychological analysis. And the psychological analysis is something that takes place at the U.S. consulates. So a U.S. consulate will get in a bunch of cases, and some of these cases, they're together in folders or whatever they're in envelopes, or they have they have some kind of. When the consular officer pulls out the case number and brings it up on the computer, he sees all the indicators, and he might see some things that were written down by the USCIS on the form. So what they do is they have a interview, and they see what the indicators are. You either have a low number of indicators or you have a high number of indicators, or maybe medium. So this is what the interview process looks like. It's crazy. So here's, I did an audit. All of these quotes, by the way, you can look them up on the internet. I didn't manipulate anything. I left the typos in here and everything. And we have hundreds of pages of this stuff in our long presentation, and there's probably 10 pages of denials and 10 pages of approvals in some of the longer videos too. So this is a typical denial. My K-1 visa was denied. We don't have a bona fide relationship. We've been in a relationship for 5 years. Now, if you've been in a relationship for 5 years, you have all kinds of proof. You have 5 years of photos together. How can some idiot at the consulate, some entry-level idiot, arrogant idiot, incompetent idiot, how can they think you don't have a bona fide relationship? Because you had a high number of indicators, and it's up to him, it's up to her, whoever, it's up to the CO, whether to deny or prove the case. And we think that most of the time it's up to, how many cases have they denied this week, or they do. They have to deny some cases. So, it might have been their turn, 5 years or no 5 years. Here's another one that was denied. There's no picture of his mom and I. Does that sound crazy? That sounds like, it's so crazy and corrupt and incompetent and, insane that they had to just take this guy and shoot him on the spot for denying a case, because there's no picture of the mother of the US Citizen Petitioner and the fiance. That's just crazy. So look through these, and, if you want to look through more examples, we have them in our longer videos. Another one here, I'm upset she's pregnant. Well, great. Your case got denied. She's going to have a baby overseas. Your family is screwed up forever. Another one, evidence is never looked at. Couple of questions, they planned a big, huge reception and wedding in the United States. Well, too bad. You got denied. So as you can see, most denials at the interview are done for failure to prove the existence of a bona fide relationship, which is basically what they put down as a denial reason. There's no reason here. They just said you failed to prove the existence of a bona fide relationship. But really, the reason you're denied is you had a high number of indicators. And the guy that's interviewing you is a moron with no psychological skills at all. So, and the government has to deny some cases. So these are approvals. Same kind of craziness here. Do you know what a K-1 visa means? What does your fiance do? Have you been to the U.S. to visit him? Are you okay with a wedding in the U.S. instead of your native country? Okay, you're approved. Here's 3 questions and you're approved. How long have you been engaged? When do you plan on leaving for the USA? How did you meet? 3 questions, you're approved. So we've had some psychology people take a look at this, professionals, all of these things, not just the ones in this tiny video here, all of the ones that we had, and they just say it's just crazy. There's no basis in science. There's no basis in the field of psychology for doing some kind of denial or approval based on 3 questions. It just doesn't exist. It's insanity. It's corruption. So here's the track record of the Department of Homeland Security and Department of State. They don't do very good. These are the 4 outcomes of this, of a case. You have couples that are either legitimate or they're not legitimate. Okay, so number 1, legitimate, they get approved. That's good. That happens 30,000 times a year. Couples who are criminal and get denied, that never happens because criminals are smart. They're smarter than a 12-year-old. If they're not smarter than a 12-year-old, they ask a 12-year-old, how do we beat the system? And a 12-year-old says, just avoid indicators. So you'll see some examples of that. Couples who are criminal fraudulent that are approved, that would be bad too, but that happens all the time. That happens to everybody. All of the criminals get their cases approved. And then couples who are in legitimate relationships, they get denied. That's bad, but it's necessary. It's necessary because they can't approve all the cases. If they approved all the cases, this country would be overrun by terrorists and by sham marriages and by human trafficking. So we have to deny some to make it look like the process is not automatic. If they can't find the bad people, they have to deny the good people. That's the way it works. It's not fair. It's insane. It's illegal, but that's the way it works. So this 2, 3, and 4 are just incompetence. They have no good track record at all of doing this. So here's, back to the interview process. This was an approval. The USCIS case was approved with no indicators. So that sends a little message to the consular officer. The entry-level, uneducated, idiot consular officer. And, what he does with cases with no approvals, he approves, no indicators, he approves them. He's not going to look at a terrorist and find and determine that she's a terrorist. Maybe a trained psychologist could talk to this woman for a few minutes and figure out she's only heading to the United States to kill Americans. But some entry-level idiot is not going to be able to do that. What happens? We wind up with 14 dead Americans. 14 Americans are no longer with us because of incompetence in the government. They approved this case. He's a terrorist. She lied on the form. So terrorists are the first target group. This is another target group. This is sham marriages. So this is a father-daughter team. They're Chinese Americans living in California, in LA. And they decided, hey, let's make millions. Let's set up, we're not lawyers, but we're going to set up a law office downtown LA, and we're going to look like a law office. And then we're going to charge Chinese people who want to become American citizens, $20, $30, $50, $80,000 a pop, whatever we can bleed out of them, to come over here and marry an American citizen. And then they have their citizenship. They have what they want. So, this is a criminal activity, and we don't want to go to prison for it. So how are we going to do it? We're not going to match up somebody from Guangzhou with somebody from Beijing, because in Guangzhou they speak Cantonese, and in Beijing they speak Mandarin. So, we're going to make sure there's no difference in age, no difference in religion, no difference in anything. So it's impossible to get caught. Because why? Because we're smarter than a 12-year-old, and because we're going to avoid indicators. There's no way in hell that the government can catch these people or identify these people. So what is this? This is another case of incompetence by the U.S. federal government. The USCIS didn't see any indicators at all. I went to the interview, and guess what? There's no indicators. Ask 3 stupid questions and you're approved. It's automatic. This is ICE, arresting people after the fact. This is, fiscal year 2015. They identified, they arrested 1,437 individuals associated with 400 different victims of human trafficking. How did they get into the country? They beat the system. How did they beat the system? If they didn't know, they ask a 12-year-old. Now, what gets me about this is, the people in human trafficking, you're talking about sweatshops or prostitution rings. Those are low-level criminals that get people in the country for those kinds of reasons. And even, they can beat the system. If they can't, they just ask a 12-year-old. This is another sign of incompetence. 400 people slipped through the system this year that got caught. This is another issue here, just another example of incompetence. The DHS did an audit and found out, whoops, we granted 858 immigrants citizenship, and that was a mistake. Well, whoops, big whoops. So this is a graphic I have. I had the entire population down here in a white oval, and that included Ds and ILs and IHs. So down on the lower left, you can see the ILs they're approved with little or no indicators. I sub H is higher indicators, and Ds are denied. So deny go in the trash can, but if you're denied by the USCIS, you can probably get a waiver, or you can possibly get a waiver. Then we're going to look what happens to the low indicators first. Most of them go on to be happily married couples. They have no indicators. They get they get asked 3 stupid questions at the interview and they get approved. Or they go on to be happily, terrorizing terrorists, or they end up in a sham marriage, or they end up a victim of human trafficking. If you have low indicators, you're going to fly right through the system and do whatever you want. You're either going to be a happily married couple or a criminal. Then there's a population of high indicators. They go to the interview. It's like a roulette wheel. You don't know what's going to happen. You could get approved. You could get denied. It depends on how many denials they've had lately, because whether or not they admit it, they have a 2% denial quota that they need to fill. And it just could be your fiance's turn. So if we look at this stuff in the blue right here, I put down, this is the whole of government approach. That would be including, I-129F indicators and the consulate interview. So let's just call this blue thing the criteria. So if you take this criteria, as an example, if you just, wonder, has that criteria ever been bumped up against a known population of terrorists? No, it has not. Has it ever been bumped up against a known population of marriages, sham marriages, which, ICE has to capture after the fact because we can identify them in the process? No, it's never been bumped up against the sham marriages. We're trying to do that now. We're going through the Freedom of Information Act to try to get the I-129Fs on all 70 of these cases. Has it ever been bumped up against the population of human trafficking, the known population? No, it hasn't. Why hasn't it been? Because the government doesn't want to be shown that their policies and procedures don't work. This is just criminal. It's criminal to use this criteria and not use the criteria on known populations to see if your criteria works. It just gives them an excuse to deny the cases of legitimate couples, which is an excuse for not getting off their butts and figuring out a way to identify the actual target groups. All they're doing here is giving us a bunch of smoke and mirrors. They're denying the cases of legitimate couples, and they're approving all the target populations. That's just pure corruption. So this is the summary. So in summary, we have this crazy diagram here. You start with the I-129F, which is the beginning of the statistical process. You do a statistical analysis on it, and you see a normal distribution curve here, and a couple standard deviations out. You're going to mark the fringes of the population, about 2%. And that's, let's say, a difference in age of 15 or more, and that's what you get. And that would all be legitimate couples, because terrorists avoid that kind of stuff. Every target group does. So anyways, you put indicators on some of the cases, some of the population, but the terrorists and the human trafficking and the sham marriages slide right through. And the reason they slide right through is that's them in the red there in the bottom diagram. They're not at the fringes. They avoid indicators, so they slide right through the system. So Mr. Jihad, welcome to the United States. Legit couples. If you have low indicators, you're through. If you have high, it's a crapshoot. And here's another way to look at this. Normal people might look at this room and see, there's a bunch of clergy in here. They're kind of Catholic looking, and the guy in the middle with the gold, he might be a bishop or a cardinal or something. And then there's a gentleman on the left who's dressed all in black and sandals and, wearing a jihadi looking hood and carrying an ISIS flag and, holding an AK-47 in one hand. But, we might look at that and say, well, he's kind of jihadi looking to me. And, we don't want him in our country. But that's not the way the government looks at it. The government just sees the cases. The cases have low indicators. So what happens? It goes to the consulate, and it, goes up in front of the consular officer to decide the case. And you can see the consular officer looks like a pretty typical consular officer, entry-level guy that looks like he doesn't, he's not a genius. And he looks at these cases and he says, well, you have low indicators. Welcome to the United States. You have to leave your gun here. You can get a new one when you get there. And if you have high indicators, some of you can get through depending on my mood, and some of you will get denied depending on my mood. Thank you for watching this, and please subscribe to our channel, and please pass this video on to your social media contacts so that everybody can see what's happening here. The way we look at it, fiance visas are some of the best, immigrants that we can get into the country. Why? Because we're normal Americans. We go overseas, we meet people, we handpick them, to become a fiance and to get married and start a family. And they're typically the people that go overseas and travel aren't going to, pick out people that would be bad for America. These are all the best immigrants there are handpicked by Americans. And, they're going to come over here and start a family and stuff, and they're going to do it legally. We should be supporting their cause, and we should address the huge, risk to the United States for the system that they're using that can't possibly identify terrorists. We should all be alarmed about that. So please pass this on to your social media contacts, subscribe, ask them to subscribe, ask them to watch some videos. We appreciate your time. Thank you. Americans have come to hate politicians so much that, we have a businessman in the White House now. And, Trump might be a little bit crazy, but he's not a politician. That's why he's the president. And Trump wants to drain the swamp. That's what we want to do. We want to get rid of all of these corrupt people, like the deputy, Secretary of State, who has all these crazy policies and procedures that can't possibly identify terrorists. He alone is responsible for a terrorist coming into this country, that the next terrorist attack coming into the country on a fiance visa, is imminent. It's going to happen. It's just a question of when. We don't like this. We would like to see him prosecuted and, put in a federal penitentiary for corruption in office. And then we would like to see some legitimate couples getting into the country, and we would like to see some other target groups being hunted down by sane people. If they can't figure it out, hire better consultants. Thanks for your time.